Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's time for Sparky's Torah time, and we're going to study the Torah together, the 5 books of Moses. And last week, I asked you to respond if you're getting things from this Torah class that are blessing you, and if you have any fun stories to share with me. And I thank you. Many of you responded and encouraged me. And one of you even shared a story about how she shared this with a Jewish friend who had been raised in a home with no religion, but was Jewish and always wanted to know about Jesus. So she began to listen to Sparky's Torah time. So all these things are exciting to me. This is my purpose and plan and passion, is to create a bridge between God's people, the Jewish people, and those of us who are grafted in, the wild branches grafted in to the tree of Israel. We stand on their shoulders. They are our foundation. And that's why it's important to study the Torah, because why? In the Torah, every page points to a foreshadowing of the Mashiach, the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth. So let's get started today. We have a great study. And before we start, go grab your Bibles so you can record some of the words you're going to learn today. And also your book that says, take a word to lunch. And that means take these words and share them with your friends. And it's a great way to open doors for spiritual conversation. So if you'd like one of those books, let me know, and I will get one to you. Also, I have my Sparky's Torah Time cup. If you want one of those, I can send you one. So, no charge, just because I love you. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to share my screen, and you know that we use this workbook, and I want to be sure and show this each time because some people are watching this for the first time and they want to know what we're using to study Torah. So this is the workbook. It's a year through the Torah, and it's a week-by-week journey for Christians, and it's written by John Parsons. And he also has the fantastic website, Hebrew4Christians.com. And so you can go there and find wonderful things about the Jewish faith, festivals, Bible study. It's an incredible site. So anyway, that's what we use for our Torah study. You can jump in at any time. It's a cycle that goes all year long, and you can jump in at any time because it never ends. So let's say the prayer that the rabbis and the Jewish people say all over the world the same day on Shabbat when they study Torah. It's in the blue, so let's say it together. By the way, it's on page 22 in your workbooks. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzevanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to busy ourselves in the words of Torah. Amen. All right, so I'm going to get my glasses on here so I can see. And today we are in Parashah called Toldot. And Toldot is a word that means generations. So this part of scripture begins with the words, these are the generations. I wanted to show you where this word comes from, and I broke it down here for you. The word Toldot is here in Hebrew, and it means generations. This is the plural form of a verb, yeled. Yeled is a child, or to birth a child. It means to bring forth. It means a destiny, and it's related to a history. So what we're going to be looking at today are those that are given a destiny and a history that's critical to carrying on the seed of the woman. And I wanted to show you this word in its ancient form. It's yeled right here, Yod, Lamed, Dalet. And the ancient symbols are a hand, a shepherd's staff, and a door. So it has to do with a hand of God talking about leading you to the door, the entrance to the kingdom. And it comes through the seed of the woman. So we're going to continue that theme as we did last several sessions and follow the seed today. Last week we talked about Ishmael and Isaac, and this week we're going to talk about two other seeds that come from now Isaac and his wife Rebekah, and that is Jacob and Esau. And we're going to follow the seed of the serpent, which is the one who always rebels against God, and then the seed of the woman, who represents obedience. So let's review last week what happened. Abraham's servant Eliezer went out and found a bride for Isaac, and he was to bring her back into the land of Canaan so that he could have a wife and carry on the seed line. So the Eliezer found Rebekah, and she was the sister of Laban back in Haran, and brought her back to Isaac. And Isaac was 40 years old at the time. So Rivkah is her Hebrew name. She was presented to Isaac, and she came with many gifts and veiled, and Isaac took her into his mother's tent and consummated the marriage there. Now, remember, we talked about all the marriage contracts and things had gone on back in the land of Haran with the father and the ketubah, the promises that each party writes to one another, and gifts are exchanged and words and oaths. And so by the time she got there, everything had been done that needed to be done except for the consummation of the marriage. So Sarah then dies, and Abraham marries a woman named Keturah, and some rabbis believe that this was Hagar. We're not sure. And he had 6 more sons. So there are a total of 30 people groups that came from Abraham. 12 sons from the tribe of Jacob, 12 chieftains from Ishmael through his line, and then 6 more sons through Keturah, the second wife. So that's a total of 30. So in last week's Parashah, we ended with Abraham being about to die, and he blessed Isaac and gave him all his inheritance. And after that, he gave gifts to Ishmael and sent him away from Isaac toward the east. And what's interesting is when Abraham died at the age of 175, Ishmael returned, and both sons came to bury him in the cave of Machpelah with his wife, Sarah. We talked about Machpelah in Parashah previous, and Machpelah means to couple. Kapal means to couple, and we get the word couple from that word. And it's buried there. They believe Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and his wife, and then Jacob and his wife. So these are the patriarchs buried there with Adam and Eve. So I wanted to show you where Ishmael went to the east. Here's Israel here, and he went off to the east, and this is where his people chose to dwell. And the Bible says that he was hostile to all his brothers, and he finally died at the age of 137. So that's just a little history on the other brother, Ishmael. So Isaac now is elderly, and he's about to follow in his father's footsteps. I'm sorry, he's not elderly. It was Abraham, who was elderly and died, and now we have Isaac and Rebekah. It's very easy to get confused with all these patriarchs, isn't it? So just like his father Abraham, Isaac would then build altars. You would see him worshiping the God of Israel and praying, and also being tested. And it would now be his turn to strengthen his very own covenant relationship with the God of his father Abraham. And that's many of us too. You know, we're raised perhaps in the Christian church or in some type of church, and then as we get older, we wander off and when we're asked, well, are you a Christian? We automatically say, yes, I'm a Christian, because we're kind of coasting on our parents' shirt tails, but we've never really developed our own sense of identity and strength in our own spiritual roots. So now it's time for Isaac to strengthen his roots. So God still had a divine plan and purpose to bring about through Isaac. And what's interesting, you have the three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There was more said about Abraham and Jacob than Isaac. Isaac was like a bridge between the father of our faith and then the ultimate seed through Israel. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. So Isaac has very few chapters on him, but mainly on Abraham, and then the most on Jacob because of his 12 sons. So that's interesting. So just like Abraham, Isaac was about to face a famine. And with the famine, God is going to move him somewhere new. So anytime something comes up that seems to you like, oh no, the sky is falling, there's not going to be any food, much like COVID today, people have fear. And it's in that time that God is about to do something, to change your destiny, to change your history, to change the generations to come. And that's the name of this parashah, Toldot, generations. So it's time to move on, folks. Don't get too secure in one place, or God can never bring you to your divine destiny. So I always say it's time to move on. And I love this word in Hebrew. It's the picture of the ayin and the tav. Ayin means eye or to see, and tav means a mark or a sign. So it's time when you see a sign. So the sign was it's famine. So now God is going to move Isaac. So he married Rebekah, but she was barren and unable to produce any more fruit from her womb. So we're going to now see a pattern that you want to bring forth more fruit. Why? Because in the fruit is more seed, and that's how the generations are passed on. So much of Jesus' teaching was agriculture related. The wheat, the tares, the tree, the fig tree, the sower and the reaper and the planter. It's all about seed, and it's about harvest, and it's about sowing, meaning that the seed represents the next generation. So I wanted to show you the fact that fruit comes from a woman's womb. I want to show you that the word for womb is rechem, and it's the same word for racham, which means compassion. And so it means to protect from harm, show maternal mercy, loving in a childlike manner, and also a protecting bird. You know how a mother protects its nest, and a tiny bird will go fight off a big hawk for the sake of her eggs and her next seedlings. And so I love the fact that these words are related. It's important for the mother to have a sense of the importance of the seed. And we'll see that in this story. So I wanted to show you a motherly maternal mercy, because Rebekah is going to be demonstrating that in this particular portion, and you're going to see it in a minute. So anyway, she was infertile for 20 years of their marriage, and then Isaac prayed for her, and he interceded like a priest, didn't he? He's the priest of the home. So he prayed for her, and she became pregnant with twin boys. So again, this would be the two seed lines. And we're told that the two sons during her pregnancy were jostling or fighting within her. And they were competing or fighting for the birthright. And so fighting, I want to show you this word in Hebrew is ratzatz, resh sadi sadi, and it means to oppress or crush. Now it's interesting that anytime there's fighting, it's to oppress the will of God. Just remember that. When there's fighting, something is trying to oppress or crush a destiny or a history. And we see that today, don't we? So God told Rebekah that from birth, the sons would be rivals. So imagine pondering that. So she was told one would be stronger than the other, but the older, Esau, would serve the younger, Jacob. So Jacob would be have dominion over Esau with the blessing. And we're going to see that in this portion. I want to show you his name. Yaakov is his name. It comes from the verb akav. Akav means to deceive, to act deviously, or one who comes after. It's also the name for a heel or a footstep. Now, it's important to see, they always say, how deceptive Jacob is, and they like to use his name as Jacob the deceiver. And although it looks like that to us, let me suggest something else. To come on the heel of something is to come after. So perhaps in the physical sense, you saw him as the deceiver, but in the spiritual dominion, he was to come after his brother or on the heels of, and it would be his footsteps that would carry the seed. So I wanted to show you more and expand on his name. And by the way, I'm going to be teaching another Hebrew class in the new year, and we use this book. And you can look up all these verbs yourself and see the fuller meaning. And so that's a good book, a good word to put in your book, my favorite Hebrew words. So it can mean devious or deceptive, but also one who comes after or one who's on the heel of another. So Esau, I want to show you his name. His name means hairy, and it said he came out ruddy or red-faced. So let's continue with that pattern of the firstborn or the older that would be ruled over by the younger. And this pattern began in the very beginning in Bereshit. When you see the actual creation is the first and then the second that came on the heels of or after would rule over. So we see the light being separated on day 1, but it was day 4 that the luminaries were put in the heavens to rule over the earth. So there's the first pattern. Then he created the animals first, but after the animals came man that would rule over the animals. Adam came first and then Eve, but after the fall, Eve would want to rule over Adam. And all the way through Cain and Abel. And Cain killed Abel, but eventually Seth would actually replace Abel and would rule over Cain. Again, Isaac over Ishmael, and now Jacob over Esau. And we see it continue in the pattern. Joseph, his oldest brother, was Reuben, but Joseph was the ruler that ultimately saved his entire family, so he was the younger. And then again, King David himself was the youngest of Jesse's sons, and Eliab was the oldest. So this pattern goes all through the Bible. So Esau is described as a man of the field. Now remember when I first did the very first Parashah, I said the field is a buzzword, if you will, in Hebrew for the world. So wherever you see the word field, it's the world. So he was a man of the world, basically, and he was strong and he loved the hunt and was driven by his fleshly desires. So he was a man of the field and the flesh. Then it said Isaac loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now, this word in Hebrew is more in the sense that favored instead of loved. We think of love like I either love you or I don't love you, but the word here in the Hebrew sense is Isaac favored Esau, and Rebekah, because she was spoken to and was a woman that was given the promise, she loved Jacob. Now Jacob was content to dwell in the tent of his mother. Look at content. I think that's funny. Kun means with. Okay, with the tent. So Jacob was content to dwell in the tent and was described as quiet. And that word quiet in Hebrew is tam. Tam means to require nothing more. to be complete. So he's a picture of having contentment. He was with his mother in the tent, while the brother was out in the world and was driven by his flesh. Jacob had the spirit that was quiet and content versus the field and the flesh. So Jacob was concerned about what went on in the tent, or what the heart of the home was, and what went on in the home. And so, again, that's a picture of what goes on the inside of us versus what goes on outside of us. So let's move on. Look at Esau. He was a man's man. This is a picture I found online, and I could just picture him in those days. He was a notorious hunter, by the way. It wasn't just his family that knew he was a great hunter, but I'm going to show you in a minute. He had quite a reputation, according to the Talmud. He was much like the men in our culture today that are the heroes, you know, the sports figures, the big wrestlers, the Olympic champions, the superheroes, you know, the movie stars, the Arnold Schwarzeneggers. This was Esau. He was a man's man. And according to the Talmud, it said that Jacob was home cooking the traditional mourner's meal. And he was making this lentil soup for his father Isaac, who was still grieving for his father Abraham. So he was mourning, and the Talmud says that Jacob was at home preparing a meal for his father. And isn't that interesting that he had a heart for the father? And just like Isaac had a heart for his father, and we'll trace that kind of heart all the way down to Jesus, who said, I only do what my Father tells me to do. So you see, it's that same attitude of obedience and honor and to the authority above him. So Esau came in from the hunt and said to Jacob, feed me some of that red stuff. And he became known as Edom. Edom means red. And so he was willing, Esau, to sell his birthright. Jacob said, well, fine, I'll give you some of that, but you give me your birthright. And he was willing to do that for the lentil red soup. And so Edom was the Edomites. And it was actually Edom that the Roman people came through, the Edomites. And so his destiny was a sellout to the flesh. He sold his destiny for soup. I want to show you the word Edom, red. It comes from the exact same letters as Adam. Adam came from the Adamah, or the earth, or the redness of the earth. And therefore, because he was red and he asked for the red soup, he was called an Edomite. And then we see in that word right here, Dalet Mem, the word blood. And there would be bloodshed at the hands of Esau. So he's going to live out that name, Edom. I just wanted to show you that. So according to the Talmud, here's where this is interesting. Esau was a notorious hunter, and Nimrod, who was still alive then, watched him closely, he and his men, and followed him out on his hunts. And they were jealous and threatened that Esau might lead a rebellion against Nimrod and his people. So one day they attacked Esau, and he battled Nimrod and actually killed him. So Nimrod's men then were in pursuit of Esau, and that is why he raced into Jacob and said, I am about to die, and was willing to give up his birthright. And perhaps he told Jacob that, and that's why he said, well, then give me your birthright. And he said, fine, I don't care. I'm about to die. So that is interesting that the rabbis and the Talmud orally passed that tradition down. It would make sense. So there was a famine in the land after that, and God appeared to Isaac, and he reaffirmed the same promise that he said to his father Abraham. It would be a promise of a land, multiple descendants like the stars in the sky, and that through his seed, all the nations of the earth would be blessed. So rather than going down to Egypt, God told him not to go there. He and Rebekah traveled to Gerar, not Egypt, and he was among the Philistines. Now, it was the Philistines, after Abraham died, they plugged up Abraham's well at Beersheba. Now, as long as Abraham was alive, they didn't dare touch the well, because Abraham was so well known and he had many converts and he had much wealth. After he died, the Philistines actually plugged up his well. So Isaac, when he comes into the territory, was afraid for his life because Rebekah was beautiful, and he was afraid, like his father with Sarah, that they might try to kill him. So he lied, and he said Rebekah was his sister, just like his father. Sins of the father passed on to the son. But God still had a plan. So when Abimelech saw Isaac, it said, jesting with Rebekah, he realized they were married. I had to look that word up. I thought, jesting, what does that mean? What were they actually doing? And to my surprise, it meant his name, Yitzhak. He was laughing and teasing her and mocking. So perhaps the teasing would have, maybe he was pinching her bottom, maybe he was whispering in her ear and tickling her, who knows? But it's interesting that that is his name when it says he saw him jesting with Rebekah. So anyway, he then declared, Abimelech, that is the he, declared a declaration of declaring protection over them, because he too had become powerful in the area, and God's favor rested on Isaac just like he did on Abraham. So it's amazing that even though he came there in fear and in his flesh he lied, God still planned to multiply him. See, it's God's covenant is coming true in spite of him. Isn't that true in your own life, how God does things in spite of us? So it says they planted crops 100-fold. They acquired flocks and herds and greatly prospered. And then the people became jealous of them. And the word jealous here is kana. Now, this is an interesting word because kana can mean protect ownership, and it also means zealous. So zealous and jealous are the same word in Hebrew. So if you are jealous for something that's rightfully yours, that's a good thing, and that's called somebody who's zealous or jealous. So, but jealous for something that's not yours is not good, and that's the jealousy that God doesn't like. So what is interesting, it's the word kana, and look, there's another word that's a sound-alike word and have a similar meaning. Kana means possessions. Isn't that interesting? Here you're going to protect ownership and be jealous or zealous for what's rightfully yours, and it's related to the word for possessions, property, acquired by legal means. So that's why I love this language, is that you'll always see a connection in words that sound alike. And I'm going to be pointing that out all through Torah study. So sound alike words share two of the three root letters, and it's somehow similar or can even be opposite. Now, I want to show you some beautiful connections here. So grab your book. These are words you're going to want to write down in your Take a Word to Lunch book. It said that when both Abraham went to a different place, he feared, and so he lied. He turned to the flesh instead of the spirit. Isaac did the same thing with Rebekah. He was afraid. Let me show you the word fear, yara here. It's Yod Resh Aleph, and it means to call to constant attention, be aware of a presence, or in a positive way, it can be in awe of something. Something that's constantly before you can be something in awe, like, wow. It can also mean to be afraid, something you're constantly thinking about or worrying about, or it's always in your head. You can't get it out. Oh no, what's going to happen? But I wanted to show you another word pronounced exactly the same, two other words, yara, but this time yara is spelled with an ayin instead of an aleph, and it means to restrict or limit space. This is actually the word for the firmament. Yaria is the limited space between heaven and earth. And that is a restricted or limited space. And then there's a third word, yara, used with a hey instead of an ayin or an aleph, and it's pronounced all of them the same. And this is where we get the word Torah, to cast forth or shoot, like at a target. Now, the word Torah comes from that. But think about to cast forth or to shoot at a target. A target is a restricted space in the center of a target, and it's restricted, and that's the one you want to hit. And so that's exactly related to the word Torah, or God's word, because it's giving you restrictions and responsibilities that God wants you to hit the mark every time. Hit the bullseye. And that has clear boundaries, doesn't it? And you really have to pay attention and take aim and become skilled at hitting the mark. So when we don't hit the mark, it's called sin. It's that simple. So that's beautiful, those three words. So now Isaac and Rebekah move on, and they relocate in Beersheba. And his servants begin to dig a well. And the local herdsmen, the Philistines, quarreled with him over the well, and they called the first well Esek. Eshek means to contend for control. So this is what the servants dug on behalf of Isaac, and he came with resistance and fighting. Then the second well was dug by the servants, and they fought again, and they called it Sitna. Now I want to show you this word, Sitna. Sitna, here it is in Hebrew, it means to retard or hinder or to create enmity. Now, the first one was Esek, then Sitna, and I wanted to show you it's the same word for Satan or Satan, and it means adversary or an enmity, or to retard or hinder. So that's the job of Hasatan, the adversary. So when we talk about Satan, he wants to hinder us from hitting the bullseye. He wants to hinder the progression of the generations of the positive seed versus the seed of the serpent. And again, it's interesting that the second well was called Sitna, which is Satan's name. And look at the ancient meaning. It means to consume, shows a picture of teeth, to surround something, and the seed. So Satan's name in its ancient form means to consume and surround the seed. So Satan is after the seed. Pay attention to that. So important. So King Abimelech asked them, after they were so successful then, to move on. And Isaac planted more seeds and produced more fruit. It said 100-fold. And what's interesting, I told you that last slide, when he planted 100-fold, I want to show you that that 100-fold is interesting, because the rabbis point out, especially the Messianic rabbis, remember in Matthew 13:8, he said, some seed fell on the good soil. Now he's talking about seed and soil, and we talked about the seed in the mother's womb. So this is the good soil, and he starts with 100-fold. Now, isn't that funny? If you were going to say he's, typically we'd say, oh, he started with 30-fold, then 60-fold, and then he got as great as 100-fold. But isn't it interesting that he reversed it? He said he produced 100-fold, 60-fold, 30-fold. Why? Well, here's what the rabbis say. This number sequence hints to the Abrahamic covenant when God blesses the three patriarchs even during times of famine. And isn't it interesting that Abraham was 100 years old when God made the covenant? Isaac's was 60, and ultimately Joseph, that came from Jacob, was 30, and then ultimately the Messiah would be 30 as well. And he was Messiah from King David through his line. So anyway, I wanted to show you what the rabbis say about this progression in the New Testament, and that Isaac planted and produced 100-fold. So it points back to something the Jewish people were very familiar with, starting with 100-fold. So Isaac then dug his third well, and it said he dug it, not the servants dug it. He dug the third well, and there was no contention. So Isaac called it Rehovot, Rehovot, or it comes from this verb Rachav. Rachav means wide open spaces, a way open. So Isaac said, the Lord has made room for us and will be productive in the land. So third time's the charm. These three wells, according to the rabbis, represented the three temples. The first temple would be destroyed. There's the opposition. The second temple, Satan, remember Sitna? That was the second temple where Satan came to Jesus and told him to jump off the temple at the very top, etc. And then the third temple, there was no contention. And that would be wide open spaces, and that would be the temple yet to be built. And we in the New Testament know all about that. So I find that interesting too. So Isaac and Rebekah went to Beersheba, and God appeared to him, as I said, and he said, don't be afraid, for I am with you, just like I was your father. And God repeats the promises, as I said. And so his servants built an altar, and there they called on the name of Hashem, and they dug an uncontested well. Now remember, in one of the very first Parashah, I said every time we see an altar built or a well dug, something prophetic was going on there that we would see in the future, even not only the Torah, but also into the New Testament. You'll see things happening at these exact sites in the Torah that would be significant and point to things that would happen when the Messiah walked the earth. So we can follow these things into the New Testament as well. So the Talmud says, as I said, these wells represent the temples. And I wanted to put it in here on a slide so you'd remember that. So spiritually, think about it. Wells are like people. They go there because they're thirsty in their soul. So spiritually, people go to temple, right? To worship because God's presence is there and it gives them spiritual life. I can see how they could relate that to a well, because you go to a well when you're thirsty spiritually. So there they're refreshed, they begin to hear God's voice, and they're cleansed spiritually. Their spiritual thirst is quenched by the well water or the living water, and that's referred to as God's Torah. It says his word falls like rain, and living water comes from the heaven. So you can see spiritually these wells are significant. Remember when Jesus said in Matthew 11, come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden. What do you do when you're thirsty and your blood pressure drops and you're dehydrated? You're unable to stand. And so heavy laden, to me as a cardiac nurse, I go, heavy laden means you feel like you're weighted down and you're about to faint. Then he said, come to me, all you are thirsty, and I will give you rest and restoration. That's exactly what happens when you give somebody who's feeling faint and their blood pressure drops, you give them water. I can't tell you how many patients in cardiac rehab would faint. And, we'd all go running over, we'd grab the crash cart and we'd call 911, and the paramedics would come in and take them off. And then the next day, there they come walking in, and we go, what happened? And they're like, oh, I was just dehydrated, and they pumped me full of 2 bags of saline, and I'm fine. I'm like, yeah, that's what happens spiritually as well. So anyway, the next day, then Abimelech comes to him, and he brings two of his commanders, and they make a covenant of peace with Isaac. And Isaac agrees to make this covenant. He invites them in, they eat and drink together, and the next morning they swear this oath. And Abimelech says, "Now you are blessed by Adonai." And what's interesting is he said, for those that don't keep it, basically there'll be a curse. So he mentions that, the rabbis say, because that was like a little hint, like, you better keep this covenant with us. So the Talmud actually says that when Isaac left the territory in Gerar and went to Beersheba, it says their wells dried up and the fruit trees stopped producing when Isaac left. Isn't that interesting? So that's perhaps why he went to make peace with them, thinking, if I have a good covenant with Isaac, then perhaps my land will be blessed as well. So that very same day, while Abimelech was still there, the servants come running to Isaac and say, "We have found water." And that just was proof that God's blessing was there for all to see: Abimelech, Isaac, Rebekah, his sons, everybody. So the well was called Shiva. Shiva means an oath or seven, thus Beersheba, the well of the oath or seven. Remember, there were 7 sheep that Abraham, his father, gave to Abimelech, the same king. And here they make an oath with the next generation. And it is the well of the oath. And we're going to see the well in the New Testament as well. Okay, so what about the 2 boys? Now, it talks about Isaac and Abimelech and Rebekah, and you hear the story about selling the birthright, and then what happened? So Esau and Jacob, the scene changes, and now Isaac has become old and his vision is poor, and he calls Esau to his side and asks him to go hunt for game and prepare a meal so that he can bless his firstborn. Now remember, it said Isaac favored Esau, and he saw him in the flesh as his firstborn. But Rivkah told Isaac, I'm sorry, that should be Jacob there. I'm going to change that right now to Jacob. Otherwise, I'll forget. Rivkah told Jacob to do the same, but he says, well, my father's going to know that I'm not hairy Esau. How are we going to fool him? And the mother says, well, I'm going to cover your hands with the skin of an animal and make them hairy to deceive the father and get the blessing instead of Esau. Now, isn't it interesting that Jacob would be covered with the skins of an animal? Where did we see that before? That same pattern happened in the garden when God covered their shame and their guilt with the death of an innocent dying for the guilty. And we see here another innocent animal covering the hands of Jacob. So Jacob, even though this seemed deceptive in the flesh, ultimately it was to receive a blessing in the spirit realm. And Esau then went on to go and he found out about it, and he was bitter. Oh, he hated his brother for getting blessed by the father. And he came in and he said, isn't there a blessing for me? Now see, what had happened in this story is Esau had married 2 women, Yehudit and Basmat, and they were a source of bitterness to both Isaac and Rebekah. So Esau in the flesh was not the favorite of Rebekah, I have to add. Probably Isaac was ambivalent, but still loved his son Isaac best. Esau. So anyway, Rebekah fools Isaac, and Jacob gets the blessing. Well, what happened next? So Isaac says to Jacob, you have the voice of Jacob, but the flesh of Esau. Now, he says, come here so that I can kiss you. And Isaac would smell of the field, just like the animals out in the field. And so he gave him the blessing. Now, what's interesting is he said, you have the voice of Jacob, Now, remember, Jacob is the one that the promise is going to come through. And he says, I recognize your voice. But in the flesh, he felt like Esau. Now, remember, we said Esau was of the flesh, and Jacob would carry on the seed and the one who would carry on the voice of God. So he says, you have the voice of Jacob, but the flesh of Esau. And he says, let me kiss you. And he smelled the world. He smelled that, but he received the blessing regardless. And then he says to Jacob, may you have the dew of heaven. That word is talal, to cover. May you be covered with a blessing from heaven, or overshadowed by the blessing of heaven. And may he give you grain. And this word is for corn, dagon, meaning multiplied. May you be beneficial in all you plant, in all your fields, and all the grain, and new wine, your vineyards. And you know what that word is? It's not wine. Yayin is wine. It's the word Yerash. And I'm like, why Yerash? New wine, Yerash, is the word for inheritance. So look, he's giving him a covering from heaven. He's multiplying him, and he's giving him an inheritance. Isn't that what we said at the very beginning? That Toldot is about a child that would have an inheritance, it would have a divine destiny, and it would carry on the seed. And so we see it here when he blessed Jacob. And it says, your mother's children will bow down to you, Jacob. And it would be a prophetic picture. Jacob, and then from Jacob, his youngest son Joseph, and then through the nation of Israel, and then all the way down to Yeshua in the New Testament. So he said that blessings or curses would follow those who interact with Jacob, and in the same way with Israel, and in the same way with Jesus. Now, isn't it interesting that today all the nations are more powerful around little tiny Israel, and that Israel now is the embassy has been moved to Jerusalem, which is where the Messiah will set foot when he returns. So I said it before, but keep your eyes on Jerusalem. No matter what happens in our country, keep your eyes on the Middle East, because that's what's really this is all about. So you're going to see that all those who interact with Israel and the people of God, and ultimately the followers of Jesus, there'd be conflict with, and there'll be either blessing or curses. And the same goes for today. So then Isaac speaks to Esau, and he gives him also a blessing before he dies. And he says, your home will be of the fatness of the earth and the dew of heaven. So he is giving him a blessing, but you will live by the sword. Now remember, I said his name means Edom, blood, redness, and you will serve your brother. But when you break loose, separate from, you will throw off the yoke from your shoulders. In other words, he's getting rid of the family yoke, and he would walk away from his father's tent. And when Isaac died, the scripture says that Esau said, as soon as my father Isaac dies, I'm going to go after Jacob and kill him. So he's going to leave his father's tent with murder in his heart. And so because he didn't receive the blessing of the firstborn, it says he wept. He left the tent of his father, weeping bitterly. And his name, he said, his name, Jacob, suits him because he has deceived me twice. Remember, first with the soup, the lentil, he sold his birthright. So he hated his brother because of the birthright, and then now this blessing from the father. And he was determined to kill him when he died. So the mother, Rebecca, heard this and told Jacob to escape and go to her brother's house back in Haran. And he did so. Then Rebekah said, "When his anger has subsided, I'll call you back. Why should I lose two sons in one day?" So she didn't want to see them fighting with one another and seeing one of them perhaps kill each other. So Rebekah told Isaac that she was sick of the Hittite women and that if Jacob was to marry one, it wouldn't be worth living. So she knew to send him away to go find a wife back with her father's people. And so she did not want him to go get another Canaanite woman and bring her into the tent. And we'll see this again when we get into the other books of the Torah. We'll see another person who goes into a tent and brings trouble. And we'll talk about that later. So anyway, Rebekah remembers the promise, and she does not want to jeopardize the blessing coming in to the land of Canaan through her people. So she separates the two boys, knowing that they're going to always fight with one another. And she goes, "Stay there until he calms down, and then I'll call you back." So this is the story. It sounds like a soap opera, doesn't it? So according to the Talmud, Jacob was in exile for 20 years and, in fact, never saw his mother Rebekah again. Perhaps her words really were prophetic, and here's why. The Talmud says that at the end of both of their lives, Esau died and was buried on the very same day that Jacob was buried in the cave of Machpelah. So the day Jacob was buried was the day Esau died. And so in fact, Rebekah did lose them both the same day. So just as God spoke prophetic words to her, again, she said, "I don't want to lose them in one day." And she tried to take care of it herself, but ultimately, God was still in control. He knew the exact day of both of their births and deaths, and the same for you and me. So I don't fear death because it's in God's hands. And he promises that all your days are ordained for you before one of them comes to be. So you have a little invisible expiration date on your forehead, and you're not going to die one day sooner or later than the days ordained for you. So this portion of scripture is very mysterious to the rabbis, and there's so many midrashim commentary regarding Jacob's deception and Rebekah's involvement in this incident. But here's how I see it, and I tend to agree with this one rabbi who said that, remember, Rebekah was pregnant, and God revealed his plan to her, not to Isaac and Rebekah, just to her, regarding the twins that would be fighting within her. And he told her that Esau would serve Jacob. So honestly, Rebekah was being obedient to the promise of God, just as she was obedient to leave her father's house and go to a totally different land out of obedience and marry a man she didn't know out of obedience, water all his camels, his 10 camels. That same kind of obedience and determination played out in her life in this story. So I don't see it as deceptive, but I see it as obedience. So he really wasn't the supplanter. In truth, Esau sold his birthright and the blessing, and eventually, according to the Talmud, he even despised it and hated Jacob, and it says so in the scripture. So misplaced hate is what he had, and he failed to see his own heart. He was a man of the field, a man of hunt, a man who was emotional, a man who didn't care about his parents. Remember the two seeds. One would submit to the authority over him, and one would rebel. Isaac called Jacob again, and he says, before he died, "Don't choose a woman from here. Go to Haram." I already told you all that. And he did this, as we look back on this story, that Isaac blessed him willingly and purposely that second time. So the first time he may have been deceived, yes, but obviously at some point over time, he began to see the blessing over Jacob's life. And in the end, in his final days, he actually willingly blessed Jacob. So he said, may El Shaddai bless you, make you fruitful, multiply your descendants until you become a congregation of people. Do you know what that word is in Hebrew? The word kahal. Kahal means a gathering or an assembly. It's the Greek word ecclesia or church. Oh my goodness. Right here it is, folks. The very book of Genesis, the church. It's the word congregation or kahal. So those through Jacob's line, the seed of the woman, would ultimately be played out through the generations all the way into the New Testament and become the church through the Messiah, Yeshua. So let's look at the contrast of the two seeds. Jacob obeyed his parents. Now remember, the blessing would come when we obey the authority over us. And your parents are the first authority over you as a child. And to the degree that you obey and honor your mother and father, that's a picture of how you'll obey the higher authority. So Jacob obeyed this authority over him, and he did exactly what they said. He went to Haran and he found a wife. He would be equally yoked. So Jacob respected and obeyed and honored his mother and father, and it brought about the fulfillment of God's plan and purpose and promise in his seed line. So Isaac continued the seed, and then now through Jacob. Esau saw the Canaanite women, and he knew it displeased his mother and father. So perhaps out of vengeance, he went to Ishmael. Ishmael was from the other seed line, and he married a third wife. So maybe it's I'll show you attitude. Remember, it said he left his father's tent, weeping bitterly with murder in his heart, and he goes to the other seed line, Ishmael. What is that saying? Birds of a feather flock together. So remember, Jesus said, my sheep will recognize or hear my voice. And isn't that exactly what Isaac said to the next seed or the next generation? He says, I recognize the voice, but I'm confused because of your flesh. Wow. In the end, through the Messiah, when he came, they didn't recognize the Messiah either. But he said, my sheep hear my voice, or those that would follow him would recognize the voice. So ultimately, when he does return, it says all would be called into the same tent of the Father, and they call it the wedding feast. And it's in the book of Revelation, the very last book of our Bible. And we will see that in the end, the Messiah will offer salvation and peace and forgiveness of sin. And he wants to bring all nations under that covering. And he offers it freely to anyone, all nations, blessed through the spiritual seed of the woman, through the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and ultimately through the Messiah, Yeshua. So if you don't know him, I hope you will consider that God is still in control. He's still today calling us back to himself, calling Jews, calling Gentiles. The Gentiles are the Goyim. That just means anyone who's not of the patriarchs, the Jewish nation. And they are the tree. And it says, the natural branches were broken off, and we, the wild branches from all nations, will be grafted back in to the tree of Israel, because it's through them that the Messiah would come and would die for the whole world. So you see, it's inclusive. Jesus is inclusive. And he wants you to know he loves you, and he died for you so that you could have eternal life and be invited to the final tent, the wedding ceremony. So I hope you'll continue to stay with us and learn more and more about the Messiah as we study God's beautiful Torah and learn about God's love and forgiveness and redemption of all nations. So keep your eyes on Israel. Keep your eyes on Jerusalem, because it's there that all the nations will fight. And in the end, we know the end of the story. It said that Jesus would return and set up his kingdom in spite of what's going on. So have faith, stand firm, and believe that God is sovereign, and we're to fear not, but live in faith. So God bless you. Shalom Aleichem, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.